In the forgotten corners of early modern Europe, where religious beliefs wrapped themselves tightly around the daily lives of the poor, a strange and eerie tradition crept through villages and rural towns. It was whispered about in hushed tones and carried out in the shadow of death. This was the world of the Siniter, a person so low in social standing that their purpose was to consume the sins of the dead. It sounds almost mythical, like something torn from the pages of a Gothic novel. Yet for the paupers of places like Wales and the English borderlands, sin-eating was an all-too-real grim way to survive. To understand the Siniter, one must first step into a time when life was brutish and short, and death was often the only certainty. Religion loomed large, and the afterlife was a serious concern. Dying without confession or absolution was thought to doom a soul to torment. Yet, what happened when a person died suddenly, without a priest to bless them? What if the dying had no last rites, no chance to clear their spiritual ledger? In such desperate times, families turned to someone. Even the church dared not endorse the Siniter. The role of a Siniter was simple in concept, yet disturbingly complex in implication. When someone died, especially without a proper spiritual send-off, the grieving family would place bread and ale on the chest of the corpse. Sometimes cheese or a bit of meat accompanied the ritual. This food, it was believed, would absorb the sins of the deceased. The Siniter, usually an outcast or beggar, was summoned to the house. He or she would eat and drink over the body in complete silence, consuming not just a meager meal, but also the spiritual filth of the departed. The idea was that by taking this symbolic act of eating, the Siniter transferred the sins from the soul of the dead into themselves. With the food swallowed and the ritual completed, the soul of the departed was thought to rise cleaner, lighter, and more acceptable before the judgment of the divine. The Siniter, meanwhile, was left with a little coin, a piece of bread, and the heavy weight of another person's wickedness festering inside them. This job was not one people sought out of curiosity or superstition. It was often born out of desperation. Sin-eaters were people on the fringes, those with no prospects, no land, no trade. They were the unwanted, the diseased, the old, or the drunk. Their very touch was considered unclean. No one wanted to associate with them beyond the morbid necessity of death. Children were warned not to look them in the eyes. Villagers might pelt them with stones if they lingered too long after the funeral. And yet when death came, even the most devout households looked their way. Sin-eating sat in a strange moral limbo. It was a practice that the church condemned, but could not quite eradicate. Officially, only a priest could absolve sins. But in remote areas where a clergyman might be days away and death could strike swiftly, people relied on old beliefs. Folk religion, pagan customs, and Christian doctrine merged into a murky blend of fear and hope. The church scorned the Siniter, but the common folk clung to the practice in secret. Better a Siniter than an eternity in purgatory. Some accounts suggest the ritual was more elaborate than simply eating bread off a corpse. The Siniter might chant a short verse, whispering prayers to absorb the guilt. In some places, they were required to take on the sins by name, or hold a symbolic item representing the soul's transgressions. The act may have been somber, even theatrical, but it was never celebratory. No one laughed. No one gave thanks. The room would fall silent, the family watching in grim reverence, both grateful and repulsed. Over time, the Siniter became a symbol of decay, someone visibly marked by spiritual corruption. Superstition painted them as carriers of death itself, while some believed they could see the souls of the condemned. Others thought that too many rituals could drive a Siniter mad. Their eyes became haunted, their words mumbled, and their presence ghostly. It was said that a Siniter died with 1,000 souls festering in their gut, each one clawing at them from the inside. Whether this was poetic imagination or a reflection of the psychological toll such a role might bring, no one can say. Curiously, most Siniters were men, but there were exceptions. In some rural areas, women took up the job, especially older widows who had nothing left. Gender mattered less than desperation. The payments were pitiful, often just a crust of food or a few copper coins. Still, in a world where starvation was common and work was scarce, even this macabre trade provided a way to survive. One of the most well-documented cases of a Siniter comes from Shropshire, England, where the last known practitioner reportedly died in the early 20th century. He lived alone, reviled and avoided. Yet when someone died without a priest, they would send for him. Despite all the loathing, they needed what he could provide. When he finally died, no one wanted to attend his burial. The irony of it was heavy. He who had guided so many souls to rest was denied dignity in death. How the practice faded as the church gained firmer control and modern medicine reduced the sudden, explained deaths that once so terrified communities. Better communication and travel also meant priests were more available to administer last rites. As literacy spread and religious doctrine became more centralized, the murky beliefs that had allowed sin eating to thrive began to unravel. By the end of the 1800s, the custom was seen more as a superstitious relic than a vital service, yet its eerie echo remains. Sin eating speaks to something deeply human, the fear of unatoned guilt, the desperation for forgiveness, and the lengths people will go to secure peace for their loved ones. It also exposes the cruel inequalities of the past, where even the dead were treated differently based on wealth and access. The rich died with priests and incense. The poor had to rely on outcasts eating bread off their chests. In literature and film, the senator occasionally reappears as a figure of mystery or horror, often cloaked in robes and shadow, whispering to the dead or carrying a haunted gaze. But the real sin eaters were far less theatrical. They were gaunt, dirt-smeared, and hungry. Their robes were rags, their liturgies silent, and their pain all too real. It is easy to romanticize or sensationalize the figure of the sin eater. The image is ripe with Gothic flair. But behind the superstition was a story of poverty and rejection. These were people used by society but never accepted by it. It performed a service no one else would, bearing spiritual burdens so others could rest easier, and they were cast aside, forgotten, and cursed. Perhaps the most tragic element is that they believed it. Many sin eaters truly thought they were taking on sins. Imagine carrying that weight day after day, with no priest to absolve you, no ritual to cleanse your soul. Just sign after sign, absorbed with every bite. How could one not go mad? In the end, sin eating was not just about death. It was about survival in a world that gave the poor few choices. It was about spiritual insurance in an age of fear. It was about the dark spaces religion could not reach, and the people society left behind to do the dirty work. Today, the tradition is gone, but its unsettling legacy lingers like a ghost at a wake. The sin eater may have vanished from history, but the questions they raise remain. What are we willing to believe to ease our fear of the unknown? What price are we willing to pay for peace? And most of all, who do we expect to carry our sins when no one else will? Thanks for joining us on this unsettling yet fascinating journey into the world of sin eaters. These forgotten figures stood at the edge of death and spirituality, taking on the guilt and darkness others feared. They weren't saints or villains, just desperate souls trying to survive in a world that offered them little else. Their stories may feel like something out of a dark legend, but they remind us of how deeply human our need for forgiveness and peace really is. As you step away from this video, take a moment to think about what it meant to live on the margins, to be both needed and despised. The sin eater's tale is more than just eerie folklore. It is a window into how people once tried to wrestle with guilt, redemption, and the fear of what lies beyond. It's a haunting reminder of how far people will go to protect those they love, event after death. If you found this story as haunting and thought-provoking as we did, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with someone who enjoys the strange and the forgotten corners of history. Until next time, stay curious and never stop asking what lies beneath the surface of the past.